everybody, and welcome to this week's Down the Shore.
This week, Margaret takes a tour of the Maritime Museum.
It's operated by the Toms River Seaport Society.
And we're going to see what nautical treasures Margaret can find.
So, stay with us.
In 1983, we acquired this building. My wife brought me over to do the civic duty and paint this building. No doors, windows are out, the roof's off, as you can see, with all the watermarks. And it took about 2 or 3 years to get the thing livable. You have to realize there was no heat, there was no water, no electricity. We know there was heat in this room because there was a chimney. One of our members brought this over so that our first meeting in our own place, we had it in this room. He came over, stoked this up in 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were ready for a 7 o'clock meeting. And God preserve anybody that had to use the John. They had to run to the local library. We hadn't put anything in down there, but we did have electricity. Many of the cabinets and things, I always get about being from Brooklyn, knowing how to nail 2 nails together. These fellas actually through scrap lumber built all these cabinets as these artifacts were coming in. So they're special. If they take you around, they won't brag about it. But I think they're nice looking cabinets. I think they've done a wonderful job on it. And then if we go around over here, this certainly was never on Barnegat Bay. It certainly looks nautical. It's a binnacle. It was off a 1942 Army tugboat. One of our trustees was a marine engineer up at Sandy Hook, and they were going to just throw this thing out. He said, "Can we have it down here?" He's a big guy. We said, "If you can get it up the stairs, you can put it here." So we've got it.
It looks really heavy.
But it is interesting. You got the spherical spheres over here to correct the deviation. Every metal boat has its own deviation. So these slide back and forth, and they can adjust it, clamp it down, and then that's the boat's compass set up. One of the other things that the kids always get a kick out of it, because foghorns to them are those loud, raucous things. That's a pleasant sound. You've got this for it to change the tone of it, and I'm the only one that blows this, so I don't have to worry.
The old foghorn type.
But these were the old foghorns that they had.
It makes a pretty big sound.
Oh, that's great. And then over here, there's supposed to be 5 of these. 4 of these are up in Mystic. We've got this one. It's supposed to be a hit and miss engine. It was built back in 1909. It is still functional. It will work. And we're going to be put to the test because over the last year, people have brought in what they say is needed to start this, the magneto coils. And the most recent one was just about 6 months ago. I recognized Emerson Electric. So under those circumstances, this one at least makes sense to me. Some of the other artifacts that were interesting are over at our, we took it over to the parade over there. The other thing that's interesting, our original lease, this is our building, this is the window that we're looking out right here. When we first acquired the property, leased the property, we only had 6 inches around the building that we were allowed to. We've got all these artifacts being donated, and we're wondering where we're going to put them. George Van Sant is a consulting engineer and a member. When we first got a 15-year lease and we got the rest of the property out here, he just made duplicates of these buildings, put it on just to kind of show how it was. We're putting in a boat shed right in this area.
Yeah, I saw it marked out.
And on the other side of that beautiful tree, we're going to have a boat shed over there. We're going to have a men's and ladies' room rather than the thing under the stair down there. And probably some kind of a learning center.
Okay, so this is all part of what Toms River Seaport Society is doing, and you run the Maritime Museum, correct?
We run the Maritime Museum, strictly a volunteer organization. And as I say, I think George Van Sant said that to put all this in, if we can find somebody that wants $250,000 write-off, it'll just cover this before you leave. One of the other things that's interesting that's along the shoreline is pound boats. I never knew too much about them. They kind of went out of existence in around 1949, right after the war. These particular models here, this particular painting is Charlie Hankins. He's got a shop that's right opposite the Crab's Claw restaurant over there. His father started the business back in 1912. He's carried it on. He and Anna have no kids, and it's just kind of stopping. He says he's retired, but he still retains the building. He and Anna, if you go over to the Crab's Claw, walk across the street, they're sitting outside, and you can sit down and chit-chat with them. These pound boats, back in this time frame, and they were in existence from around 1875 up until 1950. 33 feet long, 11 foot wide. They're open skiffs. There was a 7-man crew, 6 on the oars and 1 on the helm. Charlie tells me later on they did get one longer in here, so they didn't have to worry about it. But originally these were rowed out. Pound boats would put nets 300 to 400 yards out that were perpendicular to the shoreline. At the far end, there was a circle out there, a round net out there. Whenever fish migrating hit a net, they always head out to sea. They would go out, get caught in that net. These people would go out from March to November, about 3 or 4 times a day. They'd bring in anywhere from 15, 20, 25,000 pounds of fish, believe it or not, in one of these boats.
Wow.
They would bring them in.
Is that why they have pound boats?
Yeah. Oh, well, it was funny, the gentleman that was in here before, he heard another story on how they got the name pound boat. I understood that they were impounded out in this net, and that's where they said the pound boat came from. It was kind of just a short thing. But anyhow, this industry was a great one. They had a rail line coming down from Point Pleasant on our strip up here, from Point Pleasant down to Seaside Park. And they would pick up the fish. They would bring it into Reading, Reading Market in there, or up to Fulton Fish Market. It closed up just after the war, 1949, 1950. The rail line had gone out, and it's just a way of life. The interesting thing is that there were environmentalists back in that time contending that the fish were going to be depleted with all these nets out there. And now we've got vacuum cleaner boats and canning and everything else out there.
All kinds of people from other lands.
And that's right.
And the fish the waters.
Yes.
And then some of the other interesting...
This was back around Seaside Park.
This one here would have been up in Lavalette where Charlie Hankins was, but there was in Seaside Park, and there was one up in Bayhead. Now when you went up further north of Manasquan, they had them in various areas up there. If you went down to Long Beach Island, they had them down there.
And there was a rail line that came right down?
Well, there was a rail line for our strip up here, and I'm saying just down to Seaside Park. It came in just on the other side of Toms River and went on into Philadelphia.
Right.
Now, not to change the story drastically, but the line that went in across there also had, they would back the line over to Island Heights from
Right, that
there.
was where the Wanamaker...
That's where the Wanamaker, and I'll show you on the other map over there, but that's where Wanamaker came in history. Some of the other things that are interesting, we've got this documented as a Chinese chest, and it belonged to a Captain Halliday. And Captain Halliday sailed the Orient to Frisco.
How beautiful.
And it's a beautiful chest. We've got it documented as a Chinese chest. A couple came in 2 summers ago. She was Oriental. She said, boy, it's a great Japanese chest. I said, I have been all over this chest. Where does it say Japan? She said, well, she said, wood carvers throughout the world always carve the hairdo and the style of the country that they live in. And she said, I'm just looking here.
And they're Japanese style.
And these are Japanese, and she said there's even some pagodas if you want to look in the background. The other interesting thing, and I can only tell you, it's in here, but my nose doesn't work this well. This is all camphor wood. And sometimes if you get close enough, I don't know whether anybody's nose is good enough. Can you smell a little camphor wood?
Yeah.
And I always get a kick when I bring the kids in here and I tell them camphor wood. I said it's just like mothballs. And they're looking at me and then trying to put some mothballs.
I know what a mothball is.
Yeah. I have a slideshow. I always show this gentleman. We get these things donated to us. No name or anything else. Look at this guy in a Homburg hat, blue serge suit.
And going fishing?
Watching he's fishing.
Wow. They didn't know how to relax when she sport fish.
Isn't that fantastic? And then the other one, of course, the little girls say, oh, he about this. And I said, well, how would you like to wear bathing suits like these? And I've got pictures of my mother this way. Here's that rail line. This is Island Heights. And this is the rail line that was behind them there. There's a lot got a great history around here, and it's fun to be able to talk about it. Then as you come
It's a
around...
shame they don't still have the real line in Philadelphia. That's their problem.
Yes, it probably would help a lot
it
as far
would.
as it goes. And I guess back in the old days when they were tapping corking into the seams and boats, I guess you made your own. The family that donated this, the fellow had his bag and he even made his life a little easier by building this little brass roller so that tapping it in, he could kind of go along. I think I pointed out the fact this was Joseph Francis's house. This was right across the street. And that's where this building supposedly has some connection with his as a carriage house. In 1893, at the age of 93, he died, and the people that bought it put two big extensions out on this thing, and it became the Riverview Hotel. And that was in existence up until December of '64, and it burned down. But that would have been right across the street where his home was.
Nice location.
Yeah.
And I think I told you, did I tell you downstairs a little about Joseph Francis? What's interesting about him, I never learned about him over in Brooklyn in history, but anyhow, he was an inventor, he was a businessman and a landowner. The main concern people had down in this area at that time was to rescue people that were on board these ships. They'd send out open lifeboats. Half the time they'd lose the crew and lose the people. He came up with the idea of trying to build an enclosed boat. The first ones were made of wood and they got pounded just as badly. He finally, with a 400-ton hydraulic press, was able to shape iron for the first time and corrugate it. He came up and had this thing patented. And it was used, coincidental, in 1850 in January. There was a English boat carrying 201 Irish immigrants on board that was foundering out off Chadwick. It was all called Swan Beach over there. All these little towns weren't there. And it was foundering over there for 3 or 4 days. What they did is they fired a cannon with the line out there, and then they would hook their little life car. And here it is here. They would put 3 or 4 people in it, move it back and forth and back and forth. The interesting thing that I can tell right now is my wife does all the genealogy over at the Historical Society. Last summer she got a request from a family, can you please confirm the fact that members of my family were on a boat called the Ayrshire in 1850 and were rescued by a lifeguard. The only person that didn't make it was my brother-in-law, John Bell.
Wow.
What he did, his family was in here, there was not enough room for him. Rather than wait for it to go in and come out in a storm in January, he tries to ride in on the outside and didn't make it. So there's an Irish immigrant family that had no father. But it's just an interesting story. Now, once he got this patented, then you can see where all these other things like buoys, anything that you wanted out of metal could start being
So
made.
was this used for long?
It was used, God, I can't put an exact time, but yes, it was used until something better came up. Very possibly, once boats could throw their engines into reverse, there were no engines on these sailboats. I mean, they were just, and the prevailing wind was from the northeast.
Then they
here.
just used a pulley system.
Oh, on this unit here, that's all they did was
Up at Sandy Hook, they had the people that explained stations
that they had along there.
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Now, Sandy Hook has...
every so often they had a station that would cover that area.
Yeah, there was like every 5 or 6 miles. They were that close to doing it. It's a very interesting phenomenon all the way through.
They must have lost a lot of
We
boats.
didn't realize
Oh,
what
they
special
did.
coast we have.
There was one time, see, the northeast, we would get hit more with northeast winds where it would drive the boats up on the shoreline. The people that lived along the northern part of Long Island Sound, Rhode Island, Connecticut, the northeasters would really tend to blow them away from the shore. So you didn't have the same problem that you had as in our area. One of the other interesting things is this map here was made by Ferd Klebold for us. Ferd Klebold is over at the Ocean County Historical Society. His family at one time was involved in pound boats, and he has written a pound boat book, and I'll show you when we go in the library. What was intriguing back at this time, 1700, 1800, was that Toms River used to be called Goose Creek back at that time. There was also an inlet, which I understand is just about at the north end of Seaside Heights. There was an inlet called Cranberry Inlet, and it was in existence for about 50 or 60 years. And it closed up in 1812, right after the Revolutionary War. But it was not big enough for the men of war to come in, but certainly our privateers. It was a freshwater port that was used by a lot of fishing vessels and coastal vessels.
I think that's up where I live now, that little area. It's on the north end of Seaside Heights.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be around Sampson Street, from what I understand.
I'm near there.
Now, back in the 1820s, 1832, I think it was, they tried to open this up again, because it certainly would have helped a great deal. And I understand that they hired 300 men with horses, and they plowed, and they went through this thing, and they went home, and of course the next day they came back,
Nature
and Mother
closed it
Nature
up
said,
there.
we don't want it
Guess it wasn't
there.
meant to be.
It closed up. We have no more of these to sell. We used to sell them for $15 a piece. We've got the southern half from Barnegat Inlet south. We've still got some of those, but these are copyrighted, and Ferd was nice enough to let us sell the 100 that we did, yeah. You talk about the Wanamaker. You seem to know about the Wanamaker place. Here's the rail line that came down, Seaside Park, and over into Ocean Gate, Pine Beach. Here's the rail line that used to come over to Island Heights. And you had there, the reason that Wanamaker used this is that all his personnel could come over and stay in this camp over here. They could spend their 2-week vacation in his camp. And I understand Island Heights is trying to renovate.
They're trying to do that, the main building, the Wanamaker.
Is that so?
Yeah.
I haven't been over there just in the last...
The thought was, they thought it might make a nice summer playhouse or something of that.
Every summer.
That's where they do their art.
Art festival, which happens to be next Saturday.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
And
It's up
some
there.
people walk around and look at this.
Now these bridges both went. There was a lady in here that said it was around she thought it was around 1934 that they destroyed this bridge and this one. So all you've got is the Mathis Bridge that brings you over into Seaside Heights and on your way up to Point Pleasant. It's kind of a distorted map. This map here dates back to 1778, and I haven't got any better light for you. But again, it shows Cranberry Inlet as New Inlet and shows Goose Creek.
I thought that it was called Toms River earlier on.
Yep, no.
It was still called Goose Creek.
It was called Goose Creek and then changed later on.
And down here it says Forks River. I guess it's Forked River?
Yep.
Just change the S to a D, I guess.
And this also was back in the time frame, I forget what it was, Berkeley and Carteret or something like that, but there used to be an East Jersey and a West Jersey back in the old days. You know, when they gave somebody the land.
Yeah.
And then what's interesting about this particular room here, this was the hayloft. We did put in the insulation. We did leave the window open, even though it loses a lot of heat. That dates the building back into the 1860s. All the boats that we've got in here are nautical, marine. We've got a yachting magazine that goes back to 1925, and that covers Slade Dale's trip down to Miami in the little gray sneak box that we'll see downstairs. And what else happened around here? Oh, I know, I've got this thing out. I never knew too much about boat building, but I understand in the old days half models were functional. And what would take place is they would design the type boat that they want. Every place that there was a rib, they would cut through, and then they would be able to take this and transcribe it down on the lofting floor so that they would get the lines of this particular boat. After they got over into high-tech things, of course, then we're just using these as decorative models. But at one time, the half model was a functional operation. We've got a gentleman that gives a course once a year on half model building. What else is in this room? There's really no. Oh, the only other thing is you notice down when we go downstairs in the one room down on the first floor. There's a lightning down there. The lightning definitely wasn't manufactured on Barnegat Bay by any builders. It was in Skinny Atlas that the thing was made. But the family that bought it That has been on the bay since the day they bought it. And we also have the Gussie feathers and a couple of paintings over at Nelson Boatyard. So we got the real thing in a painting, so we've taken the time to restore it and keep it.
Nice.
Joe Lappin and a few of the old timers are putting this together. There's nothing more.
Were these things used for clamming?
You know, this one here would have been used for clamming, but live and learn. This one here was donated this year. This is an eel rig. Has to hang on, but if you want to come down this one here.
Oh, I like the rope thing.
Hold on.
This makes me feel like I'm on a ship, actually. Look, there's more down here. One here.
Yeah, funny. If I can do it,
I know, right?
This room here, we're in the process of trying to restore. This
Like this. It's nice.
particular room, when we first took the structure over, had wood floors in it. They took out the wood floors, put in the concrete, and this is where we were doing most of our restoration. Now you can see we were limited to the size boat. We've since enclosed that, as I mentioned, and we're using that year-round now. We've put this in. We're going to bring artifacts in here and try and clear up some of the clutter upstairs. And Joe Lappin and a few of the old timers are putting this together. There's nothing more.
were these things used for clamming?
You know, this one here would have been used for clamming, but live and learn. This one here was donated this year. This is an eel rig. I didn't know it, but the eels bury themselves in the mud and the sand in the cold weather. What they would do is they'd chop a hole in the ice, or if they were in a boat and it was cold, you can count on it. They would ram this long pole. You can see how long it is. They would ram it down into the mud and pull up. And you'll notice all these hooks.
Yeah.
See how the hooks are kind of
Yeah.
backwards. This is how they would
Get the eel?
go after the eels. So that's an eel rake. I didn't know that before, really. And then over in the other room, we've got a head. Put this in, boy, I'm telling you. No scam. It's occupied. It's occupied. God. Oh, man. But I wasn't a girl or a woman. You can see we left the same floor in here. Again, the gentlemen that were retired at that time, when they took this over, no water, no heat, no electricity. The first thing they did was jack the building up and put in a new foundation. They left this in. This was where the carriages were kept. We did beef up the structure with all these horizontal wooden beams. And then down in here, this was the life car that we were talking about before, the Joseph Francis
The
design.
one that they pulled in and out, right? Huh?
This is the one that they would pull in and out.
That's why. How many people?
Well,
They could just take out a couple people at a time?
3 or 4 at a time, I guess. And maybe with kids, they could get a few more in. The interesting thing is that this is on loan to us from the Tuckerton Museum. And they, in turn, I understand, have it on loan from the Coast Guard down in Cape May. So we're very glad that we're able to show it for a while anyhow until
Isn't
they
that
ask for it
interesting? I
back.
sort of imagined it was larger.
I know, I just showed the picture with them.
If you want to see something, I've put kids in here just so they can
Really?
see it.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, this thing here, I can't imagine being in this thing in a storm.
I'm going to not be claustrophobic. Right?
Oh, Lord. They said there was supposed to be enough oxygen in it for 15 minutes with 3 or 4 people in it. I don't think it's that watertight or airtight, so I don't worry about it. But it's going to be hard for you to get a shot. This is a Lyle gun. The Lyle gun, when they pull the plug out it, they would take this unit with a line attached to it, slide it in there, light the powder in the back, and hope that it went over the boat out there and not through it.
That was to secure the line.
That would go out to the
To the foundry.
that would go out to the foundering boat. They would hook it out there, and then they would just pull the boat back and forth. Slade Dale, very interesting gentleman. Back in 1925, he took this particular boat, he took it from New York Harbor, and he brought it down to Miami. It took him 3 months to get it down to Miami. And he kept the record in the Yachting magazine, which I told you we have in the 1925 edition. And against the wall over there, you can see his log of the trip that he took going down there. Another boat built exactly to the same specs. There's a fellow by the name of Frank Coyle. That's the gentleman on the right-hand side in that picture. And we don't have any information to back up that.
And this is a sneak box.
This was the boat he used. The only difference between this was he had a dagger board in here. The dagger board gave him room inside to live,
Oh, okay.
so to speak.
All right.
The people that bought it after that put in a regular septic board. And there's a club that does, well, they're going to help us restore, not restore, but document all these engines. And I don't, there's even an air-cooled outboard engine. I never thought you could have an air-cooled outboard engine, but there is one there. And the oldest one is over on the right-hand side, that Ole Evinrude at the far end. That goes back to 1924. Yeah, that's the oldest one.
What's that?
Ole Evinrude, you know the Evinrude engines? His name, O-L-E, was on that one there, so it was one of the original ones. Then the other thing that's interesting here, this is not archaic, but back during the war, there was a fellow by the name of Tom Romeo brought this in a few years ago. He had been diving 28 miles off Wildwood. There was a 400-foot Norwegian tanker that was blown up during World War II and had been on the bottom, and they were diving on it, and he brought this up, asked if we wanted to display it. Our big problem is lack of space and trying to keep it together as it's coming apart here. But it's an interesting artifact, and we're glad that we have it. The other thing that's interesting, the Crab family used to own what is now known as Double Trouble State Park. It was a cranberry bog back when he operated it, and they still lease out the cranberry bogs now. Nancy Crab is our treasurer. This was donated to us. It's over 100 years old. It's a functional drill press, and we've got all the bits. The company, what is it, Champion Blower Forge in Lancaster is no longer in existence, but it's just an interesting artifact to have, and we're very happy that they were willing to donate it to us.
Well, and thank you, Dick.
You're more than welcome.
From the Toms River Seaport Society.
Toms River Seaport
And
Society.
we thank you for the time, and anybody can come down and look at the...
I wish they would anytime.
If you have any show ideas, or you'd like to send us a letter, you can mail it to Down the Shore, P.O. Box 607, Seaside Heights, New Jersey, 08751.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's show. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a little something. Remember, you can always see us every week, same time, same channel. So see you next week.
Nobody wants to say the first goodbye. Every time I see you cry, I know it's true.